It was nearly 1 in the morning, and the sky poured a relentless curtain of rain over the city. Christopher, at the wheel of his polished black Mercedes, drove with a thoughtful expression, the raindrops forming a blurry mosaic on the windows. The streetlights reflected in the puddles, creating a strobe light effect as he navigated the soaked streets. His mind was tumultuous, echoing the harsh words exchanged earlier with Penelope, his girlfriend. She had questioned his intentions, his actions, and even his absences, which had become more frequent due to the demands of his job. Her tone still resonated in his head, a mix of disappointment and skepticism that made him question the stability of their relationship. Suddenly, a disturbing jolt interrupted his reveries. The dashboard lit up with a red alert, and the engine began to emit a hoarse sound, almost like a groan. Christopher frowned, sensing the inevitable. He cautiously turned the steering wheel, guiding the now reluctant car to the curb, where the dim lights of a gas station offered an improvised sanctuary against the storm. Turning off the engine, he let out a frustrated sigh and picked up his cell phone. The screen lit his face with a bluish light as he dialed the insurer's number. After a few rings, an automated voice greeted him, offering generic options before finally connecting with a human attendant. "Good evening, Star Insurance. This is Maria. How can I assist you on this rainy night?" The female voice sounded surprisingly cheerful, considering the hour. "Good evening, Maria. My name is Christopher Miller. I have a problem with my car and need a tow. I'm on Pioneers Avenue, near the Petromax station." His voice was calm, but irritation bubbled under the surface. "Of course, Mr. Miller. We will send a tow truck for you. Can you inform me of the model and color of the vehicle?" "It's a black Mercedes S-Class. It shouldn't be hard to find tonight." "Perfect, sir. A tow truck will be sent in approximately 30 minutes. Do you need anything else?" "No, that's all, thank you." Christopher hung up the phone and leaned back in the leather seat, letting the sound of rain hitting the car roof calm him. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to dissipate the tension that was building in his shoulders. When he opened them again, his gaze was drawn outside the vehicle. Through the raindrops streaming down the glass, he spotted a lone figure seated under the flickering light of the gas station. Even in the torrential rain, the vulnerability of the scene was palpable. A young woman, visibly pregnant, was huddled against herself, her hair plastered to her face by the water, her expression lost in some distant point. A mix of concern and curiosity made him unlock the door and step out into the partial shelter of the gas station awning. The rain immediately enveloped him, soaking his clothes and running down his skin. He approached slowly, noticing how the oscillating light of the station cast shadows over the tired features of the young woman. This scene served as an abrupt reminder that, as dark as the night was for him, others were facing far more severe storms. With his cell phone still warm from recent use in his hand, Christopher watched the chaotic rain transform the night into a blur of droplets and reflections. His eyes, now adapted to the darkness tempered by the intermittent lighting of the gas station, captured the trembling silhouette of a young woman sitting defenseless under the station's awning. She was soaked, the rain saturating the thin fabric of her clothing, outlining the shape of her advanced pregnancy against the faint light escaping from inside the store. Curious and somewhat concerned, Christopher ended the call and walked cautiously toward the young woman. With each step, the sound of rain hitting the asphalt and puddles grew louder, almost drowning out the sounds of an argument that was beginning to intensify near her. As he approached, he noticed that the young woman was not just alone. She was in conflict. A man of medium stature, wearing a heavy hood that obscured his features, was firmly gripping her arm, shaking her with a ferocity that made Christopher quicken his pace, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and concern. "Please, just let me go," the young woman pleaded, her voice trembling, cutting through the cacophony of the storm. "You have nowhere to go, Charlotte," the man retorted, his voice thick and impatient. "You need to come with me now." Christopher could not hold back. He approached the two, his voice rising above the noise of the rain. "Let go of her arm now," he ordered, his imposing presence making the man turn around in surprise. The man eyed Christopher, assessing him for a moment before releasing the young woman's arm, who immediately retreated closer to the station, trying to create distance between herself and the aggressor. "Who are you? What do you want?" the man asked, a tone of defiance coloring his words. "I'm just someone who won't stand by while you intimidate a woman, especially on a night like this." Christopher's voice was firm, and he maintained constant eye contact, challenging the man to continue his abusive behavior. The man stared at Christopher for a long and tense moment, his hands clenched into fists at his side. Finally, he scoffed with disdain and turned abruptly, disappearing into the rainy night, his rapid steps echoing in the silence that followed. Christopher turned to the young woman, who watched the scene with wide and frightened eyes. He approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, trying to assess her condition. She nodded, but it was obvious from the tremor of her lips and the way she hugged her own arms that she was far from okay. "My name is Christopher. And what's your name?" He tried to keep his voice calm and reassuring, a counterpoint to the storm raging around them. She hesitated, biting her lower lip, clearly struggling with distrust and fear before responding in a whisper that was almost inaudible. "Charlotte. Pleased to meet you, Miss Charlotte." Christopher offered a gentle smile. "You shouldn't stay out here in this rain. You could get sick. This city has many dangers, especially at night. Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head, a lock of wet hair sticking to her cheek. "No, I have nowhere to go." Christopher felt a pang in his chest at her response. He knew he couldn't just leave her there. Even with his own issues weighing on his mind, he recognized this as an opportunity to do something good, perhaps even redemptive. "Listen, I can take you to a nearby hotel. You can dry off, have something to eat, and get a good night's sleep. What do you say?" Charlotte looked at him, uncertain. The distrust was still evident in her eyes, but the need was stronger. I don't know. It's not safe to go with strangers." "I understand your concern, but I just helped you, didn't I?" Christopher tried to encourage her with a smile. "I promise, I just want to help. Besides, you need to protect that baby, don't you?" That was when she finally lifted her head, meeting Christopher's eyes. There was a spark of something that looked like hope in her gaze as she responded. "Yes, I will do anything to protect my child." Christopher extended his right hand, a silent invitation. "Then come with me if you want to protect him. I'll take care of everything." Hesitant for a moment, Charlotte finally placed her hand in his, accepting the help. At that instant, the headlights of a car illuminated the area, announcing the arrival of the tow truck. Simultaneously, a replacement car also approached, signaling the beginning of a new journey for both on that rainy night. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, turning the night into a curtain of water and dancing shadows. Christopher, driven by a protective instinct, did not hesitate to raise his voice against the injustice unfolding before his eyes. "Let her go right now." His voice boomed with authority, cutting through the noise of the rain like distant thunder. The aggressor, caught off guard by Christopher's assertive command, wavered. His eyes, briefly visible under the soaked hood, assessed the determination on Christopher's face. With a grunt of disdain, he released Charlotte's arm and, after a last menacing look, turned and disappeared into the darkness of the night, his rapid and heavy footsteps echoing briefly before being muffled by the rain. Charlotte, now freed but still visibly shaken, timidly retreated. Her body trembled, not just from the cold and rain, but also from fear and the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Christopher, noticing her vulnerability, lowered his posture and approached carefully, offering a softer demeanor and a calming voice. "It's all right now, he's gone. My name is Christopher. You're safe with me. What's your name?" Hesitantly, she looked up, finding Christopher's concerned gaze. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a fragile whisper, nearly lost in the sound of the rain. "Charlotte. My name is Charlotte." "Charlotte, that's a beautiful name." Christopher tried to smile, aiming to convey tranquility. He extended his hand, a friendly and protective gesture. "Let's find a dry place to talk, shall we? You shouldn't stay out here in this storm." She nodded slightly, still somewhat distrustful, but the need for shelter and security was stronger than her hesitation. Christopher carefully placed his jacket over her shoulders, trying to offer some warmth. They walked together toward the brightly lit entrance of the gas station, where the environment was more welcoming and less exposed to the elements of the night. As they walked, Christopher glanced at Charlotte sideways. Despite the grim situation, he couldn't help but notice the way she moved with cautious grace, each step measured, each quick look revealing a mix of strength and fragility. "Charlotte, you told me you have nowhere to go. May I offer some help? There's a hotel not far from here where you can spend the night." His voice was firm yet gentle, trying not to scare her. Charlotte bit her lip, clearly conflicted. She looked at Christopher, her eyes searching for sincerity in his words. I really shouldn't go with strangers. But you helped me. Why?" Her voice was a mix of curiosity and caution. Christopher stopped and faced her, his words carefully chosen to provide comfort and confidence. "No one deserves to be treated the way that man was treating you. I just did what I hope any decent person would do. Besides, it seems like you could use a friend right now, and I'll make sure you're safe." Charlotte looked at him, a glimmer of gratitude emerging in her tired eyes. She finally gave a small nod, her decision made by the need for safety and perhaps a small spark of trust in the man who had shown himself to be an unexpected protector on that turbulent night. "All right, I'll go with you. Thank you for your kindness." They continued their way under the less intense rain, each step bringing new hope for Charlotte. As they approached the illuminated parking lot, the glow from the headlights of an approaching tow truck pierced the darkness, signaling that it was time to leave the gas station and its ghosts behind. As they prepared to leave, Charlotte began to open up, ready to reveal the circumstances that had led her to that crucial point in her life. The dim light of the gas station illuminated their figures as they walked under the abetted rain. Christopher looked at Charlotte, noticing the way she shrank inside the jacket he had offered her, an attempt to shield herself from the cold brought by the rain. "You can't stay out here, Charlotte. It's not safe, and this rain, it's not going to stop anytime soon." Concern was evident in his voice as he watched cars passing by, their lights reflecting in the puddles, creating a dance of lights on the wet asphalt. Charlotte looked up, meeting Christopher's worried gaze. She seemed to hesitate, her mind conflicted. Insecurity was clear on her face, a mix of fear and the need to trust someone, even if that someone was a stranger. I don't know if I should," she began, her voice trembling, her eyes wandering back to the place where the man had confronted her. "But I have nowhere to go, and you need to think about your baby, Charlotte." Christopher interrupted gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "If something happens to you, it happens to him too. Let's go to a hotel, just for tonight. Tomorrow, we can think about something more permanent, something safe." His words seemed to make sense to her, a simple logic amid the chaos that had been her night so far. Charlotte bit her lip, weighing the possibilities, the danger of staying on the street versus the uncertainty of going with a stranger. After a long moment, she nodded, a difficult decision marked by an even greater need. "All right." Her voice was almost a whisper, but decided. "I'll go with you. For my child." Christopher smiled, a gesture of relief and promise. "You're making the right choice. I won't let anything bad happen to you." He guided Charlotte to the replacement car that had arrived, holding the door for her as she got in. The interior of the car offered an escape from the cold and dampness outside, a temporary sanctuary. Charlotte settled into the seat, wrapping herself more tightly in the jacket, while Christopher walked around the vehicle to sit behind the wheel. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, turning on the heater to help dissipate the chill that had settled in their bones. "Yes, thank you," Charlotte replied, looking around the luxurious interior with a mix of admiration and nervousness. Christopher started the car, moving away from the gas station. The road was relatively quiet, the rain still falling at a steady but less violent pace. As he drove, he occasionally glanced at Charlotte, ensuring she was okay. "So, Charlotte, if you feel comfortable, could you tell me a little about how you ended up in that situation?" His voice was soft, inviting, not demanding. It was important to him to understand, to know how best to help. Charlotte looked out the window, watching the city lights pass in a blur. She took a deep breath, a decision formed in her mind to trust Christopher, at least for that night. She began, her voice still uncertain. "I had a fight with my parents. They don't accept my boyfriend, or the fact that I'm pregnant." Christopher listened attentively, keeping one eye on the road as she spoke. Charlotte continued, her words gaining strength as she shared her story. With each word, each sentence, he felt a growing determination to help this young woman, not just for one night, but in a way that could change the trajectory of her life. As the hotel approached, the contours of a more complex and painful story began to take shape, promising revelations that could test the new and fragile trust between them. In this context of confession and mutual support, they would arrive at their temporary destination, ready to face whatever came next. The journey to the hotel was filled with reflective silence, occasionally broken by the soft sound of rain against the windshield and the continuous hum of the engine. Charlotte snuggled into the passenger seat, wrapped in Christopher's jacket, while the city lights paraded through the windows, turning her thoughts into a kaleidoscope of emotions and memories. Christopher, keeping his eyes on the road, felt it was important to give Charlotte the space to start the conversation at her own pace. Eventually, her voice cut through the silence, tremulous but growing in confidence as she began to confide. "My parents, they never liked David, my boyfriend. When they found out about the pregnancy, it was as if I had broken all the rules they had set for me." Her voice wavered, but she continued. "They said I had shamed the family and then they kicked me out. I didn't even have time to gather my things. It all happened so fast, so final." Christopher cast a compassionate glance toward Charlotte, feeling a mix of anger and sympathy. "I'm so sorry you went through that, Charlotte. No one should be treated that way, especially at a time that should be about support and understanding." Charlotte nodded, wiping away a tear that slid down her cheek. "I thought David would support me, that he would welcome me. But when I got to his house, things didn't turn out as I expected." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. The car turned onto a quieter avenue, approaching the hotel. The street lighting reflected on the puddles, creating a light effect that seemed to dance around them, giving the night an almost ethereal quality. "What happened when you went to his house?" asked Christopher, his voice soft, encouraging her to continue. I was about to ring the doorbell when I heard voices inside. Arguments. I decided to wait, to see if it calmed down. But then, the door opened and..." Charlotte stopped, the weight of the memory clearly affecting her. Christopher parked the car in the brightly lit hotel parking lot. They had arrived, but Charlotte's story was far from complete. "And who opened the door, Charlotte?" he asked, turning off the car but in no rush to exit. It was important to him that she felt heard. "A woman I had never seen before. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, and then he appeared behind her. His expression, it was as if he didn't know whether to embrace me or push me away." The confession hung in the air, heavy as the rain that still fell outside. Charlotte looked at Christopher, her eyes seeking some kind of understanding or comfort. "I know we need to go inside the hotel, but..." she began, hesitant. "Don't worry. Let's get settled, and you can tell me everything at ease." Christopher offered a reassuring smile, opening the car door to face the rain once more. They headed to the hotel entrance, the noise of the city muffled by the building's walls. As they passed through the revolving door, the warmth of the lobby enveloped them, a welcome contrast to the cold outside. As they walked to the reception to check in, Charlotte prepared to reveal the rest of her story, a narrative promised to be as complicated as the circumstances that had brought them there. Christopher and Charlotte crossed the luxurious hotel lobby, their steps softly echoing on the marble floor. As they headed to the reception, Christopher's cell phone began to vibrate insistently in his coat pocket. He cast a hesitant look at Charlotte, who nodded with a gesture of understanding, and he stepped aside to answer the call. "Christopher, where are you? Why are you taking so long?" Penelope's voice burst through, laden with irritation and suspicion, as soon as he answered. Christopher took a deep breath, trying to stay calm in the face of the accusatory tone. "Penelope, there was a problem with my car. I had to wait for the tow and—" "Problem with the car? Is that all? It seems like there's always some excuse. Are you with someone?" Her words were sharp, each syllable laden with distrust. "It's nothing like that, Pen. I'm just dealing with some unexpected issues." Christopher tried to soothe the situation, but he could feel his frustration growing inside him. "Always unexpected issues, Christopher. Always something more important than coming home to me. You're lying, I can feel it." Penelope raised her voice, each word a blow that widened the chasm between them. "Pen, I'm not lying. I just want to resolve this and come home." Christopher's voice was firm, but his heart was heavy with the conflict unfolding. "Don't make me wait, Christopher. Not tonight." Penelope abruptly hung up, leaving a loaded silence in the air. Christopher ended the call and stood still for a moment, the phone still in his hand. His mind was tumultuous, the argument with Penelope echoing in his thoughts, intensifying his empathy for Charlotte and his own complicated situation. He felt increasingly the weight of a relationship that, instead of offering comfort, seemed to only bring more strain. Returning to where Charlotte was waiting, he found her observing one of the artworks in the lobby, an attempt to distract herself from her own concerns. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing the somber expression on his face as he approached. "Yes, just more complications. Sorry about that." Christopher tried to smile, but the effort was evident. "Complications seem to be a constant, aren't they?" Charlotte offered a sympathetic smile, trying to lighten the mood. "I hope it's nothing too serious. Nothing that can't be resolved," Christopher assured her, though his tone couldn't completely hide his frustration. "Now, let's take care of your check-in." Together, they approached the reception, where a receptionist greeted them with a professional smile. "Good evening. May I help you?" she asked, ready to start the check-in process. "Yes, I'd like a reservation for the night, please. A comfortable room for the lady here." Christopher indicated Charlotte, who offered a timid nod to the receptionist. As the receptionist typed information into the system, Christopher glanced again at Charlotte, who seemed a bit more relaxed in the heated environment of the hotel. "After you get settled, perhaps we can talk a bit more about what you'll do next," Christopher suggested, already thinking about how he could help Charlotte plan her next steps. Charlotte nodded, grateful for the help and for his continued support. She knew the night still held more revelations, and perhaps, with Christopher's help, she could start to chart a path to a more stable and secure life. "I would really like that. Thank you, Christopher," she said, her voice carrying a mix of relief and hope. With the check-in completed, they received the room key, and as they headed to the elevators, Christopher reflected on the similarities between the turbulences in Charlotte's life and the storms in his own relationship. Each step they took together in the comfortable silence of the hotel seemed to strengthen the unexpected bond forming between them, a bond forged by shared circumstances and a mutual understanding of the struggles each faced. After the check-in formalities were completed, Christopher escorted Charlotte to her room on the third floor of the hotel. The corridor was silently luxurious, thick carpets muffling their footsteps while the soft lights of wall sconces cast a warm glow over the paintings of serene landscapes. "Here we are," Christopher inserted the electronic key into the lock, and the door opened with a soft click. "I hope you find some peace here." Charlotte entered the room, her eyes sweeping over the cozy space. A large bed with fluffy pillows, a small sitting area with a comfortable armchair, and a window offering a view of the city illuminated by the moon and night lights. "It's perfect, Christopher. Thank you so much for all this," she said, turning to him with a shy smile. "You deserve to rest. If you need anything, I'll be in the room next door." He pointed to the adjacent door in the corridor. "I'll leave my phone number here in case you need to call me during the night." "Thank you, really. Charlotte hesitated, clearly moved. "I don't know what I would have done tonight without your help." "It's all right now, Charlotte. Try to rest." Christopher stepped back, ready to leave and give her the privacy she so desperately needed. He returned to his room, his thoughts still revolving around the night's events. After a brief phone conversation with Penelope, trying to calm the still turbulent waters of their relationship, he decided to try and get some rest. The fatigue from such a tense night was beginning to weigh on his shoulders, and he felt the need for at least a few hours of sleep to face whatever tomorrow might bring. However, Christopher's sleep was abruptly interrupted. Firm knocks sounded at his door, echoing thunderously in the silence of the night. Startled, he sat up in bed, his heart racing with a sudden disruption. He glanced at the clock beside the bed. It was just past midnight. "Who is it?" he called, his voice still hoarse from sleep. "Hotel management, sir. I need to speak with you immediately." The voice on the other side of the door was serious, laden with urgency that made Christopher quickly get up and put on a robe. He opened the door to find the hotel manager, a middle-aged man with a worried expression, accompanied by two uniformed police officers. "Sir, I apologize for disturbing you at this hour, but we have a serious situation," the manager began, his voice low and tense. "What happened?" Christopher asked, his gaze shifting from the police to the manager. "The lady in the room next door, Charlotte, is being sought by the police. We have received a notification about an accusation of theft against her," the manager explained, looking apprehensive. The police officers, a man and a woman, maintained professional postures, but their looks were firm and direct. "We need to speak with her, sir," the female officer spoke. "If you could accompany us to her room, it would be of great help." Christopher felt a knot form in his stomach. The night that was supposed to be one of rest and recovery for Charlotte was about to become more complicated and possibly devastating. "Of course, I'll go with you," he replied, concern coloring his voice as he picked up Charlotte's room key and followed them down the silent corridor. What else would the night hold for them? With a heavy heart and palpable nervousness, Christopher followed the police officers and the hotel manager to Charlotte's room. Their steps echoed down the corridor, setting the rhythm for an increasingly tense situation. Upon arrival, the manager tapped gently on the door, his gesture almost reverent given the gravity of the moment. "Miss Charlotte, please open the door. It's important." His voice was calm, but laden with a seriousness that made the ensuing silence feel even denser. A few seconds later, the door slowly opened, revealing Charlotte, whose face reflected confusion and a nascent fear. Upon seeing the police, her expression turned to alarm. "What's happening?" Her voice trembled as she looked to Christopher, seeking some explanation. "Miss, we need to discuss a serious accusation against you," the female officer began, keeping her voice neutral. "You are being accused of theft." The words fell like a weight, and Charlotte stepped back, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "Theft? But that's a mistake. I've never stolen anything from anyone." The indignation in her voice was evident, and her hands visibly trembled. Christopher stepped forward, positioning himself next to Charlotte, a stance of physical and emotional support. "There's a misunderstanding here. Charlotte, tell them you didn't do any of this." His voice was firm, trying to convey confidence to her. Charlotte looked at the police officers, her eyes brimming with tears. "I swear, I've never stolen anything. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, maybe, but I would never commit a crime." "We understand these are serious charges, and we need to investigate all available information," the male officer explained, his posture still official. "We'll need you to come with us to clarify some things at the station." Christopher felt a wave of frustration, but knew he needed to act quickly. "She's not going anywhere until I speak to my lawyer. I'm calling him now." He was already picking up his cell phone, dialing the number of a trusted lawyer he knew could help. As the phone rang, Christopher looked at Charlotte, trying to convey a calm that he himself struggled to feel. "Don't worry, Charlotte. We'll sort this out," he said, and she just nodded, hugging herself in an attempt to calm down. The lawyer answered after a few rings. "Roger, it's me, Christopher. I need your help urgently. I'm at the Grandview Hotel, and a friend is being accused of theft. We need your legal assistance immediately." "I'll be there as quickly as possible, Christopher. Stay calm and don't let her say anything until I arrive." The lawyer's voice was calm and professional. "Understood. Thank you, Roger." Christopher hung up the phone and turned to the police officers, who watched the interaction with professional interest. "My lawyer is on his way. Please, can we wait for him to arrive before we take any further action?" The officers exchanged a look, and then the male officer slowly nodded. "We'll wait for your lawyer, but we need to keep everyone here until he arrives." His voice indicated there was no room for negotiation. Thus, in the hotel corridor, under the soft light that barely disguised the tension of the moment, everyone awaited the arrival of the lawyer, who would bring a new dimension to an already complicated night. Charlotte leaned on Christopher, grateful for his presence and intervention, as they both faced the uncertainty and fear of what was still to come. The police department was bathed in cold lights and neons that seemed to highlight the gravity of the environment. Christopher sat in an uncomfortable chair in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the closed door behind which Charlotte was being interrogated. With each passing minute, his anxiety grew, as did his concern for Charlotte's well-being. Finally, the door opened, and the lawyer, Roger, came out first, with a thoughtful expression. Close behind was Charlotte, visibly shaken but apparently unharmed. As soon as he saw her, Christopher stood up, the concern evident in his eyes. "Charlotte, are you okay?" he asked, quickly approaching her. Charlotte tried to offer a smile, but it was clear that the effort was immense. "I'm trying to be," she replied, her voice fragile. "Were they fair to you?" Christopher looked at Roger, seeking confirmation that everything had been conducted appropriately. Roger nodded. "We did everything possible to ensure she was treated with respect. Now, we need to discuss the next steps." Before they could continue, Charlotte grabbed Christopher's arm. Her need to share what she had learned was palpable. "Christopher, I need to explain about David." Christopher nodded to Roger, who understood the need for privacy and discreetly stepped away. Christopher then guided Charlotte to a more secluded corner of the hallway, where they could talk more calmly. "Talk to me, Charlotte. What happened with David?" Christopher's concern was evident, both by his proximity and the soft tone of his voice. Charlotte took a deep breath, gathering the courage to reveal the painful truth. "After I was expelled, I really had nowhere to go. David always said he loved me, so I thought we could live together, that he would support me." She paused, the memories clearly painful. "When I arrived at his house, everything was so strange. He seemed nervous, uncomfortable. Then, when the door opened, a woman I had never seen before was there. She looked at me like I was an intruder." "And David?" Christopher asked gently, encouraging her to continue. "He was behind her. He looked shocked to see me. All he could say was that it was complicated. I didn't understand until they started arguing in front of me. That's when she said she was pregnant with his child." Charlotte's words came out choppy, each one laden with pain and betrayal. Everything fell apart at that moment. Christopher, the man I loved, who I thought loved me, was expecting a child with another woman. Christopher listened attentively, his face reflecting the empathy he felt for Charlotte. The revelation not only explained the confusion and despair she had felt, but also cast a dark light on the complexity of her circumstances. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry you went through this." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "But you're not alone now. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Charlotte nodded, tears rolling freely now that she knew she had someone she could trust. Together, they returned to where Roger was waiting, ready to discuss how they could clear Charlotte's name from the theft charges and help her rebuild her life after so many betrayals. Gathered in a small conference room at the police station, with walls painted in a soft shade of gray that contrasted with the tension of the moment, Charlotte, Christopher, and Roger sat together. Christopher took the initiative, pulling out a chair for Charlotte, who seemed increasingly weary and shaken by the revelations and the intimidating environment of the police station. "Charlotte, can you tell us in more detail what happened that night?" Christopher asked, his voice gentle, trying to minimize the stress of the previous interrogation. Charlotte took a deep breath, gathering strength to relive those moments. "When I was kicked out of my home, my first and only thought was to go to David's house. He always said we would be together in any situation. I needed that promise more than ever. What did you find when you got there?" Roger interjected, his pen ready over a notepad. "It was late, and the street was dark and quiet. The porch light was on, and for a moment, that gave me hope." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "But when I rang the doorbell, the door was opened by a woman I had never seen. She seemed as surprised and confused to see me as I was to see her." Christopher gently squeezed Charlotte's arm, offering his silent support. "How did she introduce herself?" Roger asked, maintaining his professional tone gentle. "She said she was David's girlfriend." At that moment, my world stopped. I couldn't process her words initially. Then David appeared behind her, and his face. Charlotte trembled, the words struggling to come out. "He was pale, as if he had seen a ghost." "And what did David say?" Christopher asked, his anger towards David growing with every word from Charlotte. "He didn't say much. The woman started arguing with him, asking who I was and what I was doing there. David tried to calm her, but all he could say was that things were more complicated than they seemed." Charlotte closed her eyes, as if trying to block out the painful scene from her memory. "How did you react?" Roger was meticulously noting every detail. I just fell apart. I stood there, frozen, listening to them argue. The woman was pregnant, and she shouted that at him in front of me. She said she was expecting his child. That was too much for me." Tears began to form in Charlotte's eyes again. Christopher held Charlotte's hand, encouraging her to continue but giving her time to compose herself. "I ran out. I couldn't stay there another second. David tried to follow me, but I didn't want to hear anything he had to say. I just wanted to run away, disappear. And that's when you ended up at the gas station, where Christopher found you." Roger concluded, closing his notepad. "Yes, I just drove aimlessly until my car ran out of gas. All I wanted was to get away from everything and everyone." Charlotte concluded, exhausted. Charlotte's account provided Christopher and Roger with a clear picture of the circumstances that had led her to that moment. With renewed determination, they discussed how they could help her clear her name from the accusations and start rebuilding her life. "We will help you, Charlotte. You are not alone in this," Christopher affirmed, while Roger nodded, already planning the next legal steps. Charlotte merely nodded, relieved to have at least two people by her side in this time of crisis. Now, with the truth uncovered, it was time to think about how to deal with the legal and emotional consequences of what had been revealed. In the relatively austere comfort of the lawyer's office, with the sounds of the police station echoing in the background, Charlotte, Christopher, and Roger settled in to discuss the more complex details of the charges against Charlotte. The lawyer had laid out a series of documents and notes, preparing to build the defense. Charlotte occasionally looked at her hands, clearly nervous, but determined to clarify her role in the events that had led her there. She took a deep breath, gathering courage to reveal details she had previously kept guarded out of fear and confusion. It all started a few weeks ago. David told me he needed to make a quick cash pickup with a friend and asked if I could come along. Her voice was tremulous, but clear. He was always persuasive, and I trusted him. Christopher gently interjected, wanting to understand every detail. Did you know where you were going? Did he mention any details about this payment? No, he just said it would be quick and that we could go for dinner afterward. I had no reason to suspect anything. Charlotte paused, swallowing hard. When we arrived at the place, it was a small store, almost closing. David and his friend got out of the car, and I stayed waiting. Roger, who had been taking notes, looked up. Did they take long? Yes, longer than I expected. I started to get nervous, wondering what was happening, she continued, her voice growing softer. After about 20 minutes, they rushed back to the car, visibly agitated. David had a bag he didn't have before. Did they say anything when they got in the car? Asked Roger, his pen ready to record every word. David's friend was laughing, saying something about how easy it was. David, he was quieter, but also seemed relieved. I asked what had happened, and David said they got the money, but that things had been a bit more complicated than expected. Charlotte seemed to relive the confusion and fear of that moment. Did you see what was in the bag? Christopher asked, trying to piece everything together. No, I didn't want to ask more. I was scared, and the way they were acting, something didn't feel right. But David reassured me, told me everything was fine and that I didn't need to worry, she sighed, the weight of the memory clearly affecting her. Roger closed his notebook, considering the legal implications of Charlotte's story. Did they use any kind of violence? Did you see any weapon? No, nothing like that. Just the bag and them talking about money. It was only when the police started looking for me that I realized they might have robbed the store. Charlotte's voice was a whisper, her gaze lost on the table in front of her. Christopher placed his hand over Charlotte's, offering silent support. You are not alone in this, Charlotte. We will clear your name. With the truth finally out, they began to discuss legal strategies. Charlotte felt somewhat lighter for having shared her story, but she knew that the battle to prove her innocence was just beginning. Roger outlined a plan of action, while Christopher promised to stand by her side every step of the way. Now, more than ever, Charlotte needed all the help she could get to face the consequences of a crime she had never intended to commit. In the lawyer's office, the atmosphere was charged with tension and expectation. Roger and his team had worked tirelessly, analyzing the store's security footage and interviewing witnesses who could corroborate Charlotte's version of events. Christopher, sitting next to Charlotte, held her hand, offering silent support as they awaited the news. Finally, Roger entered the room with an air of confidence that immediately eased some of the tension. He carried a thick envelope of documents and a USB drive containing crucial recordings. We found something substantial that should greatly help your case, Charlotte, Roger began, placing the documents on the table. The store's footage clearly shows that while you were in the car, you never entered the store or actively participated in the robbery. Your behavior does not match that of typical accomplices. Charlotte took a deep breath, relieved, while Christopher squeezed her hand a little tighter, encouraging her. And there's more, Roger continued, opening the envelope. David and his friend were captured this morning. During the interrogation, pressured by the evidence, they ended up confessing. They admitted that you were unaware of their real plans. Charlotte felt a wave of emotions, her hopes renewed for the first time since the ordeal began. Tears of relief started to form in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, focused on what still needed to be discussed. Does this mean I can go home? that all this is over." Her voice was tremulous but full of hope. "Almost. I will present this evidence to the prosecutor and request the charges be dropped. Given the clarity of the evidence, I expect this to be resolved quickly." Roger adjusted his glasses, preparing for the next legal steps. Christopher, relieved by the developments, turned to Charlotte, his gaze full of admiration for the strength she had shown. "You've been incredibly strong, Charlotte. I'm so relieved the truth came out." "I couldn't have gotten through this without you, Christopher," Charlotte replied, her gratitude evident in every word. "Thank you for not giving up on me." With the documents in hand, Roger bid them farewell, promising to keep them updated on the proceedings. He left the office with a determined step, ready to tackle the legal challenge ahead. Charlotte and Christopher left the office together, the daylight seeming exceptionally bright after the dark tunnel of despair they had traversed. As they walked outside, they talked about the next steps, about how Charlotte would begin to rebuild her life now that her name was being cleared. She knew there was still a long way to go to fully recover from the trauma and unjust accusations, but with Christopher by her side and now free from the charges, she felt ready to face the future, no matter how uncertain it still seemed. After the complexities and challenges faced in recent weeks, Christopher found himself at a crucial point in his personal life. The ongoing arguments with Penelope, exacerbated by recent tensions, had become unbearable. Sitting in his office, gazing out the window that offered a panoramic view of the city calming with the evening, he pondered his choices. The decision, though difficult, seemed clear and necessary. With his cell phone in hand, Christopher hesitated for a moment before dialing Penelope's number. The ringing seemed to echo in the silent room until she finally answered. "Christopher, where have you been? You've been so distant lately." Penelope's voice carried a mix of frustration and fatigue. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The truth is, we've both been unhappy for some time, and it's not healthy for either of us." There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, Christopher thought she might have hung up. "So, what are you saying?" Penelope finally spoke, her voice low. "I think it's better if we go our separate ways. We need space and time to maybe find the happiness we can't find together." The sincerity in his voice was palpable. I didn't expect this," Penelope confessed, surprisingly calm. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's for the best." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, outlining the terms of an amicable separation. When he hung up, Christopher felt a mix of relief and sadness, but he knew he had made the right choice. As he processed the conversation, his phone rang. It was Roger, with final news about clearing Charlotte's name. After thanking the lawyer and hanging up, Christopher reflected on Charlotte's future, who had shown remarkable strength and resilience. He knew he could offer something that would help in her personal reconstruction. The next day, Christopher invited Charlotte for coffee at the small and elegant cafe near his office. Sitting at a table, with the cozy atmosphere of the cafe around them, he didn't waste time. "Charlotte, you've faced immense challenges and handled them with incredible strength," Christopher began, observing her attentively. "I'd like to offer you a position at my company, not just as help, but because I truly believe in your potential." Charlotte, a bit surprised, smiled shyly. That would be wonderful, Christopher. I really need a fresh start, and working at your company, I'd be very grateful. It's an entry-level position, of course, but there's plenty of room for growth." He explained the details of the job, which involved the communications department, where her skills could be well applied. "I'd love to accept," Charlotte responded, hope shining in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in me. It's a new beginning, Charlotte, for both of us." Christopher toasted with his coffee, a genuine smile framing his lips. They continued their conversation, discussing ideas and future plans. Meanwhile, the notion of new beginnings seemed to rejuvenate both Christopher and Charlotte, providing them a sense of purpose and direction that had been obscured by recent difficulties. Several years had passed since Charlotte began working at Christopher's company. During that time, she flourished not only professionally but also personally. The painful memories of the past, though not completely forgotten, had been transformed into steps she used to elevate herself to new heights. On a spring afternoon, at a charity event organized by Christopher's company, they had the opportunity to reconnect after months without seeing each other due to work commitments and travel. The event was held in an elegant city ballroom, decorated with vibrant flowers and soft lighting, creating a warm and refined atmosphere. Christopher was adjusting the microphone on stage when he noticed Charlotte enter the room. She was elegantly dressed, wearing a blue dress that perfectly complemented her confident demeanor. Her hair, once simply tied back, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. He paused for a moment, impressed by the transformation. "Charlotte!" exclaimed Christopher, stepping down from the stage with a broad smile. "You look amazing. It's wonderful to see you again." Hearing her name, Charlotte turned, her face lighting up as she recognized him. "Christopher! It's been so long. I'm so happy to see you." They approached each other, and Christopher couldn't help but notice how her presence still carried the same positive energy, but now with an added layer of confidence and maturity. "You've changed so much, Charlotte," Christopher commented, his tone mixing admiration with a touch of surprise. "And it seems like every challenge has only made you stronger." "Thank you so much, Christopher," Charlotte replied, her smile reflecting both gratitude and pride. "It's been a journey, for sure. You were a crucial part of it. Believing in me at that critical moment. I'll never forget it." "And how are things?" asked Christopher as they walked together toward a group of guests waving at Charlotte. "It looks like you've been excelling in all aspects." "It's been an adventure. I took the lead on the company's new sustainable development project, and it's been so rewarding. It's challenging, but I love every part of my job now." Charlotte spoke with palpable enthusiasm, her eyes shining with passion for her work. "That's wonderful to hear," Christopher said, genuinely happy for her success. "I always knew you would do amazing things." They joined the other guests, chatting and laughing, and for a moment, everything they had faced seemed distant, transformed into memories of a time that had shaped, but not defined, who they were now. The night continued with a special glow, each moment highlighting how Charlotte had transformed from a woman seeking help into a figure of influence and inspiration. As the night progressed, Charlotte shared more about her hopes and future plans, each word reinforcing the respect and admiration Christopher felt for her. It was evident that while each had walked their own path of growth, the reunion had rekindled a special connection, based on mutual respect and the memory of a time that, against all odds, had brought something good. As the months passed after their reunion at the charity event, Charlotte and Christopher found themselves increasingly involved with each other. Initially, their meetings were casual, coffee after work, lunches during the week, occasionally accompanied by lively discussions about company projects or expansion plans. However, as they shared more of these moments together, they realized that each meeting left them eagerly anticipating the next. One autumn afternoon, while walking through the city park, observing the fallen leaves coloring the ground in vibrant hues, the conversation took a more personal turn. They shared laughs and childhood stories, revealing deeper layers of their personalities and life experiences. "You know, Christopher, I never imagined that night at the gas station would be more than a chance encounter," Charlotte said, a note of wonder in her voice as she looked at the lake before them, reflecting the golden evening sky. "Neither did I, Charlotte," Christopher responded, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of affection and admiration. "But I'm so grateful for that night. It brought me you." They continued walking, their steps in sync. When they reached a secluded park bench, they sat down, contemplating the reflection of the trees on the lake. Christopher took Charlotte's hand, encouraging even greater closeness. "Charlotte, these past few months, they have been incredible. You've brought so much light into my life," he said sincerely, squeezing her hand. "And I've been thinking, maybe we're ready to explore this further. What do you think about making this official?" Charlotte smiled, her heart beating faster with the suggestion. "I would love that, Christopher. There's no one I'd rather share my life with." With that confirmation, a new chapter began for them. In the following months, they made their relationship official. Intimate dinners, weekend getaways, and nights spent discussing dreams and aspirations further strengthened their bond. They discovered that, beyond being romantic partners, they were steadfast allies for each other, facing challenges together and celebrating victories. Christopher and Charlotte not only explored the new dynamics of their relationship, but also committed to building a future together. They planned joint projects, both personal and professional, and openly discussed their values and life goals. One quiet night at home, while sharing wine on the couch, Christopher looked at Charlotte and said, "Do you remember that rainy night, Charlotte? I never imagined that such a simple act of help could completely transform our lives." Charlotte smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I will always be grateful for that night, Christopher. It brought us here, and I can't wait to see where we go next." They toasted, the soft sound of their glasses clinking echoing in the comfortable silence of the room. Life, with all its unexpected twists and turns, had guided them to a place of love and mutual understanding, a testament to the transformative power of a rainy night and a gesture of kindness.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.